So I'm joined here by Andy of McIntyre Productions and Conrad of Commonwealth Realm. Zelda for Wii U was not at E3, a new Zelda game was at E3, and it seemed like it was more of a Four Sword style game, and to me it doesn't look like a real Zelda game because they put all of the focus on three players in a dungeon helping each other out. And they gave the point that one of the main game mechanics is picking up and doing sort of a totem pole, and whoever's on top can hit puzzles that are higher up, hit enemy weak spots and stuff like that. And they tried it with 4 players, but they said that it ended up being too tall and the game didn't work out. But I look at it as you can have it be 4 players, but don't make it require being played with 4 people. Have all the puzzles and stuff still need 3 people, and have the 4th player on the bottom defending the totem pole of links and hitting the other enemies. And they also made the point to say that it wasn't necessarily Link that you're playing as in the game. From the Nintendo Treehouse event, or whatever it was called, from the information I gathered, Zelda has been cursed with an awful dress, and it's up to these other characters living in the village or the town to save Zelda, and by doing this they end up wearing outfits of their own that changes how they play. They can have bigger bombs, more arrows, stuff like that, larger spin attacks, and it just seems like more of a Zelda game than Tetra Tracker or Tingle's Ruby Wonderland, but it seems less of a Zelda game than even the Four Swords games were, which hardly ever get brought up. And I would just like to know your thoughts on the game, and are you excited for it? What do you expect from it? And just overall thoughts.
Well, it does look like it's a full-on canon Zelda game, which I'm kind of frightened on what's going to happen to the Zelda timeline at this point, and the whole cluster that it already is. In terms of the gameplay, it does look interesting, but I do find some sort of a feeling that this is kind of like a holdover until Zelda Wii U, which I don't really want to think that that's the case, because obviously this game at least had a year in development. So obviously Nintendo had some thought and input in this in advance, since it's releasing in the early 2016, right? And in terms of the whole totem pole mechanic, I do find that a bit interesting. It does, it's pretty much using all of the engine and some of the bosses actually from Link Between Worlds. I'm curious on what this particular title is going to be in the future. I'll try it out. It does look interesting, but I'll definitely have to see more about it.
For my particular opinion, I'm also a little bit anxious in terms of the timeline placement of this game, if it turns out that it is fully canon, since we already have troubles with Four Swords Adventures, especially, as pointed out in here. And I personally think that it looks fun. It looks fun. It's definitely fun, but playing for people, probably even online, it will be a little bit difficult if you think about it, actually. So I have no special thoughts about it. I think it looks fun. It looks like it has overworld that is important in every Zelda game. It has dungeons. Of course, the structure and layout within them are different than in other Zelda titles. It looks like they're not going for the structure they had in the Four Swords game when you had the Force Gems. They're actually going for rupees and heart pieces. And apart from it, I think the game is basically a holdover title for another 3DS Zelda. And you better just continue, since Jess had to go.
Oh. And the thing is about, let's say, Triforce here, was it really, in terms of story, Of course, Zelda is got kidnapped, and then the links, or I'm just going to say they are links because that's what they look like, are pretty much just sent there to save like a classical story. In terms of the story, I'm curious who's the main villain, and they are trying to pull off the whole like Triforce of courage, wisdom, and power. Like each link is red, green, and blue with each of the respective Triforce colors, and so I'm wondering whether or not that's just a superficial kind of a simplification, or whether or not they actually have different things. Like let's say the red link is stronger, or let's say the green link is faster, or something along those lines. In terms of, let's say, the actual gameplay, it does look pretty much like a mixture between Worlds and Four Sword Adventures. And what do I really expect out of it? Really, I just really expect just kind of like a casual multiplayer experience. I don't really expect anything more about that, really. And also, looking at the gameplay, you could also see a couple of notes, like let's say Red Link is in trouble, or Red Link got a heart. So obviously there's going to be a lot of cooperation dealing with puzzles. And I was wondering, what more is there really to say about how Triforce Heroes?
Something really interesting that I noticed was if you get attacked, then all of your all of your friends and allies lose hearts as well.
Alright, just to start off really quick about this particular Metroid title. The last Metroid game we received was Metroid Other M, which by all means, it's not a true Metroid game, not in the slightest. It has Metroid themes in particular in it, but largely it doesn't have the theme of exploration, and it doesn't even have puzzle solving at all, really. And it has kind of a half-baked story. The gameplay is passable, I will give it that. But largely, it didn't really satisfy the need. Like, it wasn't really a Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. I consider that to be the weakest of the Prime trilogy, and I consider that game to be vastly superior to Other M in all shape and form. That being said, we haven't gotten a true Metroid game in about 5 years, and we received a new spin-off called Metroid Prime Federation Force. Interesting thing, I thought the Metroid Prime series was finished ever since Metroid said themselves that Corruption is the last Prime game. And the whole notion of Metroid Prime is the Metroid that has been infused with Phazon or mutated by Phazon or something of the sort. And the Prime series always revolved around Phazon, the blue substance. Metroid Prime Hunters is the only really exception to that, but it typically revolves around Metroid Prime. And Metroid Prime, after the course of Metroid Prime 1, spoiler alert, Metroid Prime becomes Dark Samus. And then Dark Samus dies in Metroid Prime 3. And the whole planet of Phazon, or planet Phase, I believe, was completely destroyed, and destroyed all traces of Phazon. So there's no more Phazon, there's no more Dark Samus. So why is Metroid Prime still the title? That's the whole series is revolving around Phazon and Dark Samus. So I'm curious of what this whole thing is going about. I really don't want to believe that they're just putting Metroid Prime just to sell Federation Force, because that just seems like a cheap way of doing it. Just call it Metroid Federation Force, then I would completely be fine with it. But like, I have a feeling that they're slapping Metroid Prime in there just to give more of an advertising backup here. The game does look fun, but the thing is, I came at the wrong place at the wrong time. Like, if it just came out, like it was revealed right after, let's say, Other M, it wouldn't really get so much hate. But the fact that it's been 5 years, it's a bit of a misnomer.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people were thinking about it too. They were all curious on why Prime was included in the title, and I think that may be why, because if they can put an extra word on the title, if it doesn't go along with the story, but it helps it sell more copies, then maybe, who knows? They could have other reasons as well. I mean, it could tie into the Metroid Prime games, but we'll just have to wait to get more information or more details about the story.
Yeah, for me, basically the last proper Metroid game where you had no story, no characters, just you, the isolationist Metroid, which Metroid is all about. It was in the original, it was in Super Metroid, it was in Metroid Prime, was Metroid 2 Echoes that came out in 2005. And I've been missing individual Metroid title where it builds on the elements of exploration, isolation, and being completely alone against those massive threats that Samus has to overcome. So for me, this particular announcement is a huge letdown for the Metroid franchise, since Other M, though it was a proper installment in terms of the budget, the structure, the cutscenes, and so on, it didn't feel like a proper Metroid game because it was extremely linear. And what was great about Metroid games in the past was that the Metroid that in the world you had to orient your way yourself. If you had to get to one place, you didn't have a map that pointed you to that place. You had to discover it and find it yourself. In Prime, for instance, you had this mechanic that if you got lost and went too far away from the location you were supposed to go to, you had a hint system that just pointed out the location, but it didn't point the way to the place. It just pointed that you were going into the wrong direction. And that's what I miss in the last now 2 Metroid titles, Metroid Prime Federation Force and Other M. It's that it's no longer that it's up to you to explore. You're just being taken on a tour along the game, and everything is taking place in front of you. So I'm a bit disappointed, and I hope we could get a return to the isolationist and exploration nature, which is the true essence of the Metroid franchise in the near future.
Well, other than Federation Force, we did get Metroid Prime Blast Ball, which in a sense, it was already, like, Blast Ball was first revealed to Nintendo World Championships, and there's actually some hints that it was actually leading towards a Metroid game. In the background, you can see this particular title that says GFS, and GFS is an acronym for Galactic Federation Ship, and which that's pretty much how the Galactic Federation designates their ships. For example, the GFS Valhalla and GFS Olympus from Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. And so that was kind of like the one hint there that pretty much said that Blast Ball was a Metroid game before they officially announced it. Blast Ball looks more like an arcadey game, and that's what Federation Force kind of is seen as well. They're very, very arcadey, just a good time with your friends. They're not in a sense a true Metroid game in a sense to have that sense of isolation, but it's more or less just a good time with your buddies.
Do you think Metroid Prime Blast Ball, or whatever the full title is, do you think it's sort of a way, since most kids play on their 3DS, it's a way for Nintendo to introduce them to the Metroid series for the first time, so whenever they do release a full-fledged Metroid game, they'll end up asking their parents and it'll maybe sell more units?
Well, I don't know that if that's the particular thing they're going towards, but the 3DS does have a larger install base than the Wii U. So maybe they're trying to cater towards more Metroid fans that way and try to test the waters. I'm not sure if Nintendo is just trying to target kids in particular. The trailer didn't really seem that way, in all honesty, and the fact that they showed Blast Ball at Nintendo World Championships, and that's a hardcore event right there, just shows that it doesn't really go that way. And statistically speaking here, the Metroid games really are more for the hardcore community. I think Metroid Prime 3 was the most casual Metroid game out there. It's not really a franchise that attracts a lot of casual fans, and I don't think that's a good idea to try to market it towards.
So we were talking about the Nintendo World Championships briefly. Do you think this is an event that we can see Nintendo doing more often at future E3s or during their own events?
Well, it would be a good idea. It's excellent PR work, and Reggie going up against Hungrybox, that was just incredibly funny. I do see Nintendo doing this more in the future, and at least Nintendo of America is actually very, very close towards the fan base here. Nintendo of America does a great job with just PR work and stuff like that. I do have a hunch, though, that Nintendo is going to do a live press conference at next E3, considering they are showing the NX. So I do have a feeling that they are going to go towards a full-on live press conference next year when they do show off new hardware.
I think that'll be the case as well, since they made it perfectly clear that Aonuma and Iwata were both still in Japan because they didn't have a big new Zelda game to show off and they didn't have new hardware to show off. And I think that implies next year is going to be a big reveal, not for just the NX, but for whatever changes they've made for the new Zelda game, as well as a possible full Metroid or Metroid Prime game on the NX, and maybe even a huge Mario game, which people, I think, buy more games for a console during the launch cycle than they do later on, because that's the only time you're going to be buying 3, maybe 4 games at a time. And I think if they put out all of these big games right whenever it launches, it'll be better than sort of trickling them out one at a time throughout the year.
Yeah, I think that Nintendo will just have to work on the format, and they need to go back in terms of the reveal of consoles, since I don't see how they could properly reveal the console on through a digital event. You need to overwhelm people when you present your new console. Just remember how they announced the Xbox One and PS3. You need the console, just like the reveal of the Wii. That is probably one of the most incredible reveals of all time, where Iwata just put his hand into his dress pocket and pulled out the console for everyone to see, and you had that flash of flashlights immediately right after. It's also about the particular moment, creating the hype, creating the anticipation, and putting attention on your console in a proper manner, since you can do as much with a video and as much with a direct press conference. Since the press, especially who are attending the conference, will then be able to take pictures at the spot and then immediately push out the news. A new console from Nintendo. It is so and so much more powerful than the PS4 and Xbox One. It has these and these features, and it will support these and these type of games. Nintendo has regained the third-party support from EA, Ubisoft, Square Enix, and so on. It needs to be big, it needs to be ambitious, and it needs to prove that Nintendo is serious in terms of their future plans in the console market. That is what they need to do next year.
Alright, and for sort of a final question for you guys, a big new thing that was shown off at both Microsoft and Sony's conferences was virtual reality, with Microsoft's partnership with the Oculus Rift and Sony's own little step into virtual reality, which is the Morpheus. Do you think Nintendo could be working on something like that for the Nintendo NX, or do you think they're just going to make a straightforward gaming console?
Well, in terms of, let's say, the whole push towards virtual reality, I do want to see where it takes in the near future. I'm not particularly sure where it's going to take in the grand scheme of things. Let's say Microsoft just recently showed out their HoloLens with Minecraft. I'm not particularly sure that would sell. It does look interesting, but I just want to see where's the profitability behind it. I don't really see let's say VR catching on like a big social event thing. Maybe it could, but I'm still have some reservations about it.
Yeah. To me, it just seems Nintendo's always talking about new ways to innovate gameplay and add new features. Right now, the biggest innovation does seem to be virtual reality, but usually they're the company that dabbles into the new tech first, with touchscreens, 3D, second screen interfaces. It just seems like something that they would have been more likely to have done first, and now that they're not the first console that has it, it makes me wonder if they're even going to try to do it at all. Since at this point, all the other major consoles have already announced their virtual reality, it doesn't seem like it would be that innovative for Nintendo to go ahead and do it, which is something they throw that word around a lot whenever they talk about new experiences and new games and new hardware.
I think that Nintendo first and foremost should not concentrate in terms of gameplay possibilities, but more about games, how they can get back the third-party developers, and just try to regain trust in the market. Since the problem with the Wii U is that it has been underperforming, especially in terms of console units sold. The last reports were around 10 million units, which is terrible for a Nintendo console. It is half the number we had with the GameCube, and the GameCube had a lifespan of a little bit less of 5 years, from 2001 to 2006. And I think that the Wii U, with those low sales, is the main reason why they are moving so far quickly over to the NX, and probably will be revealing and launching the console next year. So I don't think that Nintendo will focus mainly now on virtual reality. For them, the most important thing at the moment is develop a console for the future and regain trust to all partners, and especially then third-party developers, since that has been the great issue with the Wii U. It has had absolutely no third-party support after 2013.
Well, this is I believe, like Conrad talked about in a previous conversation we had, that we are in a transition period here. That right now the Wii U was in a sense a blunder, financially speaking, for Nintendo. And will the NX will the NX kind of carry off Nintendo towards their salvation, or will it plunder it down towards the abyss? That's yet to be seen. But considering what Nintendo's steps they did now with this digital event and just kind of just hoarding up for the next console is a good move in my particular perspective. So I am confident to see that the NX will, at the very least, the way I'm seeing it, will have a better launch period than the Wii U did.
Yeah, I would just say that it's the right moment to move over to the NX. I don't think we will see the successes of the PS4 or Xbox One to at least 2018, and then the NX will be out for at least 2 years. We'll be able to gain their own market, get the third-party support they need before we will see the announcement of new consoles from the competitors, Sony and Microsoft. And we can say that Nintendo is not trying to compete with them, but in general, that casual market that they had in the 7th generation with the Wii is no longer there. They have moved over to mobile games. And that's what I think also Nintendo needs to do. They need to create a dedicated gaming console and just develop AAA titles such as Zelda, such as Metroid, such as 3D Mario game, and create new IPs such as Splatoon. And I think the console will be able to sell by itself, add third-party support, and I think that it will be fully able to compete with Sony and the Xbox consoles.
Well, I would like to thank both of you for joining me, and if somebody was interested in watching more from you guys, where would they have to go?
Oh, you can find my particular channel at Productions. I pretty much just talk pretty much about Nintendo, generally Nintendo-centric content, we have discussions and so forth, and yeah.
Yeah, and you can go to my channel, Commonwealth Realm, where I do also a lot of Nintendo content, mostly Zelda theories and Zelda in-depth videos, Zelda Unknown. A new series coming up is History Time, and I also do discussions. So check out youtube.com/Commonwealth Realm.